Good afternoon. Today is the 4th of April, and it's time for yet another very vague, not particularly interesting, and probably quite boring vlog. Something that I remember reading about many years ago when I was in the era of the pre-internet days, where if you wanted to look for a car, you had to go and find the local copy of Auto Trader or Exchange in March or something like that. Was that if you were to ring up somebody about a car, the first thing you would do, presuming that the advert didn't show them as a trader, would be to say, I'm ringing about the car. And I still use this tactic now if I'm unsure whether someone's a trader or a private seller. Because if you do come across a trader who's not advertising themselves as such, but if you ask them that question, they're likely to say, which car? Obviously, there can be a situation where somebody who's a private individual would be selling two cars at once, but obviously that's much less common. The reason I'm thinking about this now is because at the weekend I went to look at a potential replacement for the very now long dead Volvo C70 T5. And I had one lined up that I didn't go and see in the end because the car sold actually before I got there. I didn't make it in time, somebody else bought it, which is fine. We're very privileged in the position that we're in at the moment, in that we don't need another car. We don't need one. We don't need to replace either of the cars that we have, and also a mother's car, which she doesn't use, so we're not desperate at all to get a new car. Both the cars we've got are perfectly functional. One of them has just had some new brakes and a control arm, and so we're not desperate in any way. We're not desperate, so I can afford to sort of just do it very slowly rather than try to panic and run around and try to find something quickly. And it depends what position I'm in a professional life as well, as whether we have to do something like this. Sometimes people need cars really quickly. I've had instances where, you know, people have unfortunately had a car written off and they need another one really quickly, and I've done jobs very quickly. Also, I've had instances where I've had to do the same job twice because somebody's taken a while to think about it, and you know, in the meantime when they thought about it, the cars that they looked at the first time round are gone, so we have to do another search. So, you know, I've been in both situations with clients and also, of course, in my own life. So when the car that I was actually going to go and see over the weekend wasn't available, I knew that there was another one around, and I wasn't initially going to go and see it, but the seller was asking too much money for it, and I could really tell by the advert that this wasn't a private individual anyway. There were two ways I identified this. So the usual way, you just look at the way the advert's written, and you just can tell by certain phrases and a certain style that this is not somebody who very rarely sells a car. It says sort of things like, I don't know, first to see, will buy, mint condition, you won't find a better one. Phrases like that, which are not typically used by private sellers. I mean, sometimes they are, it depends what they want to do, but they don't tend to be used by private sellers so much. The other thing was, that car had been on sale the previous month for under 3 times that price. Under 3 times. And as far as I could see, I asked a question to the seller because it popped up locally as well. It had been advertised locally and snapped up at some really cheap price with a new MOT, way under what it was worth. And I asked the seller, what have you actually done to it? because the MOT had various advisories, and rather than saying, oh yes, I've addressed this advisory and that advisory and all sorts of things all ready to go, is you sort of expect somebody might do if they're sort of moving it on. It just appeared that he just cleaned it because he didn't answer my question. I actually sent him over the list of advisories from the cars. Which one of these have you addressed? There were several of them. So I was a bit sort of put off by this, charging what was between 3 and 4 times the amount of money that the car had been sold for previously on the same site within about 6 weeks. And all that seems to have been done is he cleaned it, because the photographs were a bit better. He said he'd had it checked over by a mechanic, and he said it was all fine. And I was just really worried by this stage. I decided I'd leave it alone. But what happened was, when I had the incident that I had been, pipped to the post by somebody else on the first car, he just contacted me just out of the blue. Just said, I've dropped the price by £500. And so it wasn't any more sort of 3 times the price. It was about, I don't know, between sort of 2 and 2.5 times the price, which is still quite a margin, but never mind. It then sort of became relatively cheap for one of those. So I went over there. I took my lady wife with me, as I'm beginning to do quite a lot, because it's always very useful to have a second person there, even if they don't know an awful lot about cars, particularly if they're going to be driving that particular car, or you think they're going to be driving that car. You've got to make sure they're happy with it as well. And so I took her over there, and of course the first signs were not particularly promising. The chap was definitely a trader. He had trade plates in a car parked right outside his house, which wasn't the car we were there to see. And he'd kind of said in his message to drop the price by £500. I need to get off my driveway by the end of weekend. And I just said to him, I said, look, if it's, once I've seen it, if it's what I'm after, I'm not going to mess you around. I'll let you know immediately. And if I do want to go ahead with it, I'll leave you a deposit, and then I'll come pick it up the next day, which was the end of the weekend. I'm not going to mess you around. I don't like messing people around. I really don't like doing that. I'd rather tell them pretty much immediately after I've seen something that I want it or I don't. It's just polite. Or if you're with somebody who needs to make their mind up, you just say, look, if you don't hear back, just assume we're not going ahead. You don't really want to have to sort of bit where somebody sort of goes back to you and you still can't give them an answer. It's better that way, really. So I had a look over the car, and it was all scuffed at the front bumpers. You couldn't really see the photographs, but it was. There was lack appeal on it. The wheels were curved, and I've been open the bonnet. It wasn't the best news. The oil was very low, and so was the coolant. And this wasn't the type of car that was known for leaking tons of oil or tons of coolant. We're not dealing with certain kind of engines that are very familiar to me. This time we're talking something else. And power steering fluid was alright, though, that was fine. So I got in and went for a little drive. My lady wife, very useful, she was there just to sort of keep the chap talking. I didn't have to talk to him. I could just get on with having a check over and being thorough, because that's really what I do in my professional life. I'm there to be really the most thorough and annoying person possible, if you see what I mean, to somebody selling a car, because that's my job. So I checked over it, and thinking like, okay, if he's not done these advisories, car needed to camp out, that hadn't been done either. So what has he actually done to this car? Has he just cleaned it? And if he's had the mechanic check over it so there's no issues, why hasn't he simply topped up the coolant and the oil? That would have taken less than 5 minutes and cost him virtually nothing. What is going on with this car. So we took it out for a little spin, and to be honest, it drove okay. It wasn't anything particularly fancy, but it drove fine. But there was a problem with the tracking, and I could just feel it when I was driving along. And he said, oh yes, it needs 2 new track rod ends. Having had a track rod end done on the Saniel, the very morning that I was looking at the car, I was thinking, yeah, well, it's not a massive problem. I mean, you can just get Mr. Coleman to do that for me. It's not going to be particularly difficult or expensive, is it? But it's just kind of, so what has he actually done to this car apart from clean it and supposedly take it to this mechanic? And the mechanic would have noticed immediately if the track rod ends needed changing, and so he probably had, but he hadn't done it, and he said the mechanic didn't really work. It said he won't find a better one. It's like, oh, I'm sure I could find one of these cars that doesn't need 2 track rod ends doing, and has some coolant in it and has some oil in it. So I got back, and he said just drive it straight into drive. I was going to try to reverse it in, so I put it in reverse. No, just drive it straight in. I said, okay. So I reversed it up, then put it forward onto the driveway, and then the gearbox actually broke. I tried to put it into park, it's an automatic, but it wouldn't go past neutral. It would go down to drive and some of the other gears, and then back into neutral. Wouldn't go any further. And at that point, my lady wife got a little bit concerned. What we had to do, because the driveway was on a slope, we had to put her in a driving seat, and she's not very confident sometimes in driving. She can't really drive just any car. She gets really sort of nervous and makes mistakes, and this particular incident, because it was an auto, she was really unsure as to how to just, I don't know, simply kind of just turn the car on and just steer it. She ended up trying some left foot braking for some reason. I don't really know why. I don't understand why, because she drives this Rover quite regularly, and it's an auto, and she can drive it, but it doesn't matter anyway. She just kind of just we had to tell her that, to steer the wheel one way, and the 3 of us pushed it up and eventually got it onto the road where it would go forward. So she got out and she was a bit nervous, and she said, I don't like this, didn't have parking sensors or cruise control. I was thinking, well, a lot of old cars don't have parking sensors or cruise control, they don't have a lot of other things, but never mind, at least the air conditioning worked well. That was nice. So then the seller drove off at some massive speed in the car, and this sort of modest family car from yesteryear that he was driving was being driven like a rocket ship. That's not going to help get rid of the problem with this gearbox, is it? It's not going to do anything. And he asked me if I knew what the problem was. I said, I don't know what the problem is. I have no idea. So he got it back, and he couldn't just couldn't get it beyond neutral. Fortunately, the handbrake worked okay. Sometimes in old cars, handbrakes don't work, and so we just sort of left. And I got this message from him a bit later on saying, you're too strong. You pull the selector rods out. And I was thinking, that's actually not true. It's a serviceable item. I've actually driven another car quite regularly with exactly the same gearbox in it, and you just got to make sure you lubricate, clean these selector rods in that, as Mr. Coleman then later told me. So we decided we wouldn't buy it, and so the search continues. But I keep having this phrase in my mind. It's an old Latin phrase. I did Latin A-level. It's caveat emptor. I mean, anybody who heard of it, it means may the buyer beware. And it's absolutely true. I've had great experiences with private sellers in the past. Some of the best cars that I've had have come from private sellers. I've had great experiences with dealers before. I've had great cars, both for myself and clients come from there. But just always need to be really careful. And as I said before, never have mentally bought a car in your head before you see it. Just don't. And you can walk away and you can say no. I'm very privileged, as I've said, that I'm not desperate for this other car. I'm not desperate to have it. I've got money to pay for it, but I don't need it. And you know, the more I drive this Rover, it makes me very happy with the choice that I made 3 years ago when I bought this. I'd had a lot of work done to it. It's not been the most reliable car. I still really like it. My lady wife is sort of happy with the Sanyong. It's a car and she drives it. I don't think she feels particularly strongly attached to it one way or the other. That's fine. It doesn't matter. She's not really into cars. It's not really a problem. As long as she's okay to drive it for the time being. That's all the work done to it, particularly the new tyres, new brake pads, track rod ends and new wiper blades. We'll just keep it until we just decide we want something else. And as for things to replace the C70, who knows? There will be news when there is news. Anyway, thank you so much once again for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like us in the comment below, and we shall see you again soon for more surprisingly rambling stories.